Hello again, everyone, and welcome back for another politastic episode of Fundy Fridays. I'm your host today, James, and if you're new here, my fiance Jen and I talk about evangelical Christianity and conservative politics on this channel. It has been quite the eventful year for some of the previous political subjects that I've covered on this channel. For example, it's been a shit show, and that's not even getting into the whole recent development with Lauren Boebert possibly having been involved in sex work, meth use, having potentially had some abortions. I'm not going to get into any of that today. I've been trying to follow this story. I know it's still developing. It's a pain in the butt. Things are coming out every day, and the last thing I would ever want to do is disparage someone who was in a tough spot and did what they had to do to survive. So I'm not going to touch that until more information comes out. But suffice it to say, we're due an update video on all of these folks anyway, so stay tuned and don't stress. Good lord, this whole thing though, man, it just makes me feel so discombobulated. Have you ever broken your phone and your whole life's in your phone, and so it's that dream where you're taking the test and you didn't study? Thankfully, I no longer have to worry about those fears thanks to our wonderful sponsors at Casetify. Oh, hi. You know, I don't know about you, but when I'm relaxing on a hot summer day in my luxury Terra elevated pool, I like to make sure that my phone case matches my chill summer vibe. Right now, go to casetify.com/fundyfridays to save 15% off your next order. Casetify now has cases for the entire Galaxy S22 line, along with the Pixel 6 and Pixel 6 Pro line and the Galaxy Z Flip 3. It's the same protection that iPhone users have been enjoying for years, making sure that you know your phone is in the best possible hands. Sick. Casetify works hard to promote their brand in an eco-friendly way. They already make their cases and materials for shipping out of a wide variety of recycled materials, and they even allow you to send in your old phone cases through their Re-Casetify program to earn future savings on brand new cases. And quite frankly, I don't know about you, but that doesn't look like a recycled phone case to me. That's top quality, and it's saving the planet. You cannot beat that. Just listen to that. That's good stuff right there. Recycled and powerful. As we all know, a fun day at the beach has all kinds of hazards for your phone, like the sand, the sun, and not to mention the slippery sunscreen. Now don't worry, my phone is protected from drops of 6.6 feet by Casetify's G-Tech 2.0 drop protection technology. And so once again, thank you to Casetify for sponsoring this video and for offering all of you 15% off your next order at casetify.com/fundyfridays. Woo! Yeah. Alright, so now that we've gotten all of the official business out of the way, it's time to continue marching forward with the almighty graphic and dive into the man in the middle himself here, Madison Cawthorn. Man, can you believe I've been using this graphic since January? Back then, I barely even knew how to put the check marks on it. And see, now I've gotten good enough at Photoshop that we can take Paul Gozar's ugly mug here and replace it with whoever we want. Since Paul is from Arizona, I went ahead and chose my favorite Arizonan, Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter Michelle Branch. What? I was a sensitive teen and her music spoke to me, damn it. But see, unlike Gozar, our boy Matty Cawthorn doesn't look like Kevin Spacey trying desperately to audition for the role of Emperor Palpatine. Madison Cawthorn is, for lack of better phrasing, objectively kind of hot. I mean, come on. He looks like the love child of Tom Brady and Clark Kent. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand. It's like an 80s movie villain kind of hot, like those teen movies, I'm gonna beat you in the big ski race and then, knock down your youth center or whatever. He's a bad guy, and he's gonna knock down the building and put in a parking lot and a gourmet coffee shop that you and your friends can't afford, but he's got that jawline and those muscles, and you just want to bury your face in his neck and... well, you get the idea. But even beyond the dreamy looks, Cawthorn just seemed to have the it factor from his very first days entering the American political arena. He had a huge wave of momentum coming out of his first election, a come-from-behind dark horse victory in a turbulent 2020 cycle. Kennedy-like charisma and crowd appeal, and he's literally a white guy. As an outsider in 2020, I really didn't think there was anything that could stop Madison's rise to the top of American politics. But even just a month ago, he was getting headlines like this, so you know that somewhere along the way, things took quite a turn. And as I'm sure at least some of you are aware, this story is unlike a lot of other Fundy Fridays ones in that it has a happy twist ending, so stick around until the very end, you'll want to see where this goes. So just how exactly did we go from fresh-faced GOP young gun with the it factor to a hot mess facing his local judgment day? Well, like always, in order to figure that out, we're going to go ahead and start from the very beginning, all the way back at Madison's birth. David Madison Cawthorn was born on August 1st of 1995. If that very sentence doesn't make you feel like you want to check yourself into the nearest retirement home immediately, well, then I invite you to get off my damn lawn. We don't have any official word on why Madison is one of those kids who decided to go by his middle name instead of his first name, but I'm assuming it's just because he thought his middle name was cooler. Oh, so what, like David from the Bible isn't cool enough for you, dude? Psh, whatever. Oh, and as an aside, I really wanted to call him David throughout this episode just to be, like, petty, but I thought about it, and that's really disrespectful. I believe that when someone tells you how they want to be referred to, you should really try and follow that just as a sign of respect. You know what I mean? Madison's parents are named Roger and Priscilla Cawthorn. He also has a brother named Zachary, who seems to boast a much quieter life as a financial advisor. Information about Madison's parents was particularly hard to come by throughout the research for this episode. This article that I found seems to be copy-pasted across a lot of shady websites, and is really the only thing I could find that directly references them in any kind of biographical way. I also think that it may not be the most legit source, but I'm going to go ahead and read it for you all, just so you can make up your own mind. Madison Cawthorn is a model and actor. Roger Cawthorn is his father's name. His father is proud of him and his achievements. Roger exhibits his support for his son by retweeting his son's Twitter tweet. Looking at the photo on his Twitter account, his father happens to be in his 40s or 50s. Priscilla Cawthorn is the mother of Madison Cawthorn, and seems to be in her 40s. She admires her son, and is always there for him. Madison was born to Priscilla on August 1st, 1995. During her son's wedding, she appears to be excited. She was overjoyed, and joined her son in one of his wedding performances. At the end of the performance, they also hugged one another. Oh, that's nice, I suppose. I mean, my parents provided me with the whole love and affection thing, but they've never retweeted my Twitter tweets. But for real, we can piece some things about his parents together through other articles about and interviews with the Cawthorn family. This passage is from an interview the family gave with reporter Angela Nicholas of the Asheville Citizen-Times. In this house, too, are some added blessings. Inside the walls, primarily over light switches, are several Bibles placed during renovations and notes from individuals who worked on the house during the renovations. Scriptures add decorative touches throughout the home. In the renovated upstairs shower, Psalms 35, "Joy comes in the morning," is on the shower wall, greeting Roger and Priscilla each morning, reminding them of their journey and how God has blessed them, she said. Alright, so from that we can discern a couple things. One, they're Christian, and it would seem to be pretty devout, too. It's not your standard Easter and Christmas type of Christian who's decorating all the light switches with Bibles, after all. And once we combine this information with a little bit more about Madison's educational background, the picture comes into much clearer focus.
One, I think you should homeschool. I was homeschooled all the way through. I am proudly a college dropout. If you are not becoming an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, I highly encourage you to drop out. It's a scam.
Okay, yeah, sure, dude. I'm real concerned that some privileged baby like you, who couldn't hack it in any school not run by his mama, thinks my degrees are worthless.
I hope I do really, really good at home school, so that way I can get into a home college, and then I could get a home job and make tons of home money.
In their defense, the Cawthorns do seem to have tried to provide Madison with something of a well-rounded traditional high school experience even while he was being homeschooled. Madison particularly seemed to enjoy athletics, participating in both the Asheville Saints football team and the Asheville Trailblazers basketball team. Both of these teams were composed of homeschooled youths and competed in leagues of homeschooled teams. That puts Madison in quite a proud pantheon of athletes who were homeschooled for religious reasons. Everyone from the Williams sisters to Tim Tebow to Lawson Bates, seen here getting his shit rocked. Also, just in case you didn't know, Lawson Bates hit Fundy Fridays this week with 2 highly inappropriate copyright strikes. That's why you're getting a gif of him getting his shit rocked instead of like a video clip. We know that his striking finger's real itchy right now, so we're just trying to play it safe. I also just want to say thank you all from the bottom of my heart. The Genonites and all of your kind words and advice and assistance throughout this week, they really have been the only thing that kept Jen and I afloat sometimes. So from the bottom of my dumb little heart, thank you so much. But before we move on, let's take a moment and just all enjoy Lawson getting hit over and over together. Now, importantly, both of these teams that Madison played for would like you to believe that they accept any kids of any faith background, while also maintaining firm and formal ties to the Christian faith. The Trailblazers operate out of the Western Carolina Athletic Conference, which is itself a subdivision of the larger North Carolinians for Homeschool Education Athletic Conference, which is itself a subsidiary of a large and powerful homeschooling advocacy group of the same name. In contrast, the Pioneer Football League operates all of its own teams independently, along with its games, tournaments, and its cheerleading program. Both the NCHE and the PFL want you to believe that they are totally open to any eligible age student. And to be fair, they do allow enrollment of any eligible age student. But make no mistake, both programs do maintain formal ties to organized Christianity. In particular, the NCHE likes to portray that they are truly open to any family that is passionate about parentally guided learning and home education, regardless of faith background or anything else. They're also pretty careful to avoid anything on their website that might come across a little too Jesus-y. But deep in the bowels of their own very weird online homeschooling TV show, we can find the real story.
NCHE operates on the basis of biblical principles. We affirm the Nicene Creed, hold to the authority of Scripture for doctrine and practice, and seek to support Christian parents in helping their children follow Jesus Christ.
On the other hand, the PFL is much more overt about its Christian leanings. While, as I said, the team does allow technically any eligible age youth to enroll, they put their Christian foundation proudly on the front page of their website for all to see right away, and do make sure to separate their cheerleading and football programs by gender. I will also say that the PFL's news section of their website does leave quite a bit to be desired, as you can see here. And furthermore, I must admit I find it a little interesting that the Asheville Saints seem to start sucking ass right around the same time that Madison would have likely played varsity, getting their heads caved in 3 years in a row by the mega-chad Carolina Crusaders. Now you may be asking yourself, James, you didn't take this whole detour just to tell us that Madison Cawthorn was probably a crappy middle linebacker in high school, did you? Yes. Yes, I absolutely did. And also, I'm gonna make you watch Lawson get his shit rocked again. Hell yeah. But no, for real. I say all of this because it's actually going to come up a little bit later. We'll find that Madison takes a somewhat similar approach to integrating himself into American politics that the sports leagues of his youth also took when integrating themselves into the social scene of their local region. Be just normal enough so that no one notices the weirdness without a second glance, while maintaining a blazing streak of fundamentalism that hides just underneath the surface. Beyond just his involvement in sports, though, Madison also seemed to have at least a somewhat normal high school experience in terms of employment as well, reporting that he managed a Chick-fil-A restaurant for a time while he was in high school. Sadly, this is the part of the story where things really do take a turn for the horrific and tragic. In 2014, Madison's life would forever be altered by a terrible accident.
Thanks to social media and a network of prayer, Madison has a lot of support at a time of critical need. An 18-year-old from Hendersonville, admired by so many. One day last week, he's at Disney World with friends. The next day, he'd begin the fight of his life.
Because he has so many injuries. He lost a kidney,
Parents Priscilla and Roger
ruptured his diaphragm,
spoke to us by FaceTime from Daytona.
punctured both lungs.
Now he's in critical condition. They tell us buddy Brad Ledford was behind the wheel during the accident, losing control and hitting a concrete pylon. The car ended up in flames. Cawthorn ended up in this hospital in Daytona. He needed spine surgery.
They said they wanted to do that as soon as he got here, but they couldn't because they said your son was dying when he came here.
Now, I want it known that I am not going to make fun of this accident, make light of any of the struggles that Madison has faced with his injuries, simply because I do not agree with him politically or like him personally. However, this is where we really first saw just how actively and aggressively Madison is willing to lie in order to spin a narrative in his favor. Let's hear directly from him about his experiences during the car crash in a speech he gave at the Patrick Henry College Chapel in 2017. Also, before we play this clip, I do feel the need to mention that while I did not personally choose the picture you're about to see on this video where Madison looks like every gay porn star from 1990 to 2010, I absolutely do approve of it, and I'm not changing it, because why the hell would I do that?
Someone comes and starts to jam open the door, and it opens just enough to where Brad can get out. And then he was my brother, my best friend. He leaves me in a car to die in a fiery tomb, and he runs to safety deep in the woods and just leaves me in a burning car.
Damn, yeah, okay, that is one hell of an accusation for Madison to level at anyone, particularly someone like the driver of the car, Brad Ledford, who he claimed to be his best friend. I mean, if someone left me to die in a fiery, burning car blaze while they ran off cowardly and let other people try to save me, if I survived it, I would never speak to them again. Yeah, see, but about that, let's go back to that same 2014 news segment with Madison's parents that we saw earlier.
If it wasn't for him, Madison would have died because the car was on fire.
Madison needed help.
And the driver had to break out a window.
But Brad acted quickly to save his friend.
He wasn't scared, didn't run from the fire. He pulled Madison out of the car because he was unconscious.
Well, I also know that if someone told an entire arena of people that I had left them to die in a fiery car blaze, I also wouldn't speak to them again. So that definitely makes it real odd to see this picture of Madison and Brad being super chummy in 2020, 6 years post-crash and 3 years post-massive lie. What's sad is we now know that when this picture was taken, Brad didn't even know what Madison had said about him in the wreck. Brad now reports that the two have patched up their friendship since the lie, even though Madison to this day refuses to officially recant that version of the story. All I can say is Madison must have one hell of a silver tongue. Also, weapons-grade dick move of mass destruction, bro, God. But moving on from 2014, Madison was committed to leading a normal life and overcoming the challenges that had been put in his way by the wreck. He did end up graduating from high school and even attended his graduation service remotely from his hospital room. Kind of a rarity at the time. One thing to also know is that sometime prior to the car crash, Madison had been provided with a letter of recommendation for placement at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland by former Representative Mark Meadows of North Carolina. That's one of the weird perks of being a congressperson is you're allowed to directly recommend people for placement at one of the country's top military academies. And for those who don't know, getting into any one of those military academies is, objectively speaking, a massive accomplishment. I mean, it's on par with an Ivy League, but even they don't require a letter from a senator to be able to get in. Suffice it to say, these academies only take the best of the best. So when I say that Madison was denied admission to the Naval Academy before the crash, I don't mean that as a slight or a roast. I mean, even the recommendation of a U.S. congressperson doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot at a school where everyone comes in with a recommendation from a U.S. congressperson. And if you're all small fish in a big old pond like that, someone's just going to end up getting eaten. But once again, Madison wasn't about to let the truth get in the way of a good story. or his own ego. This, once again, from the Asheville Citizen-Times. The narrative created by Republican congressional candidate Madison Cawthorn paints a picture of a bright young man headed to the U.S. Naval Academy until he was severely injured in an auto crash. Madison was homeschooled in Hendersonville and was nominated to the Naval Academy by Rep. Mark Meadows in 2014, according to the 11th District candidate's website. However, Madison's plans were derailed that year after he nearly died in a tragic automobile accident that left him partially paralyzed and in a wheelchair. But in a sworn 2017 deposition obtained by AVL Watchdog, Cawthorn admitted his application to the Academy had already been rejected before the crash. The campaign did not comment, despite repeated requests over several days. Now, if you ask me, this whole thing kind of feels like that shitty old riddle about 2 American coins equal 30 cents and one of them is not a nickel. Madison's team just tried to say 2 things really fast, both of which were technically true, and hoped that your brain built a bridge between them. Madison was nominated for the Naval Academy. The car wreck did fuck up a lot of his plans. But even though his plans of going to the Naval Academy did get fucked up, it was not the car crash that fucked up those plans. And also,
the correct answer is a quarter and a nickel.
No, because you said one of them isn't a nickel.
Right. The other one is.
You lied to me.
Following his graduation and subsequent denial from the Academy, Madison would move to working directly in Mark Meadows' office as an aide. For reference, Mark Meadows is a colossal figure of American politics all on his own, and despite all appearances, is not just Will Ferrell trying to do that George W. Bush impression he liked to do in the early 2000s. Truthfully, Meadows is probably going to get his own episode at some point, but for now, all you need to know was that he was a major political mentor of Madison's. Now, the exact details of this relationship between Madison and Meadows have come into question, in part because, as we've seen, Madison lies all the time about basically everything. We are able to confirm that he worked for Meadows' office from early 2015 until the middle of 2016, about 18 months in total. Now, in an interview that Madison conducted with reporter Paul Moon of the Citizen-Times on October 2nd of 2020, he stated very clearly that he was a full-time employee of Meadows, notably when that wasn't even the question he was asked. But then I will push back on the idea of the work experience mean. I mean, you know, I don't have 40 years of work experience. I'm only 25 years old, but I've worked in a congressional office for 2 years. And was that a paid job? Yeah, I was full-time. But see, after a little digging, the Citizen-Times was able to discover that for that entire 18 months, Madison's total wages for that full-time employment totaled up to negative $1,155.55. No, I said that right. Negative $1,155.55. Yes, somehow Madison ended up owing over $1,000 to Meadows at the end of his full-time 18-month employment term. Wow, owing money, right? Typical young person. Somebody needs to get Dave Ramsey on the horn right about now, am I right? And see, when asked for comment about this discrepancy, Madison's office just took his approach and answered a question they wanted to answer instead of the one that was actually asked, highlighting that he had actually been a part-time employee in part due to accommodations made on account of his injuries. What was excluded from this excuse was how he somehow ended up in the fucking red on his wages, or why he lied about any of this in the first place. But either way, we do know that Madison's term of employment ended with Meadows right as he began his enrollment at Patrick Henry College in the fall of 2016. For those who don't know, Patrick Henry College has sometimes been called God's Harvard and is a popular private college for individuals looking to climb the conservative political ladder. Located in Purcellville, Virginia, this school also houses the headquarters of the National Homeschool Legal Defense Association, demonstrating particular friendliness to evangelical homeschool enrollees, which I'm sure wasn't a factor in Madison's choice of college whatsoever. But sadly, even at a school built for people specifically from his background, Madison managed only 1 semester of straight D's before unceremoniously exiting college to never return again and to begin his speaking career as a proud college dropout. He tells the story like this in this segment from the Washington Post. Cawthorn attributed his poor grades in college to suffering from a brain injury after the accident, definitely. I think it slowed my brain down a little bit, he said in the deposition, made me less intelligent, and the pain also made reading and studying very difficult. Now look, I took psychology in my junior and senior years of high school. I majored in psychology for my undergraduate, and I'm so loopy about it that I even went back and got a master's degree in a psychological discipline. So you can be comfortably assured that I've seen a Phineas Gage documentary or 10 in my day. I understand and I am fully sympathetic to the needs and difficulties of those who suffer from traumatic brain injuries. Brain trauma can change a person's ability to think clearly, process information, use their social skills, all kinds of stuff. And honestly, I'd be a little bit surprised if that wasn't a factor in Madison's decision to leave college. But we cannot forget that Madison really likes to lie. And he's just not a one-trick pony for the overt lies either. He is more than happy to go the passive route of lying by omission. For example, when Madison says that he left school primarily because of medical concerns, he's omitting about 99% of the story.
Cawthorn faced numerous allegations of sexual harassment while attending Patrick Henry College in Virginia just 4 years ago. Accusations Cawthorn has denied.
His MO was to take vulnerable women out on these rides with him in the car and to make advances.
Caitlin Coulter went to school with Cawthorn and says she was taken on what he called a fun drive. According to Coulter, Cawthorn asked her about her purity ring and her sexual experiences. Coulter says she felt something was off and shut down the conversation.
He got really upset and he whipped the car around and started going back to campus at 70, 80 miles an hour on these one-lane roads. And it was really scary.
CNN spoke to 2 other women who went to school with Cawthorn. Both of them also mentioned his invitations of the so-called fun drives and that turning him down would result in more unwanted attention. There was a lot of sexual innuendo, Lee Petrie told CNN. It got really uncomfortable walking to and from class. He would yell out, "Are you ready to take that fun drive today?" That pestering continued. That attention was not what I wanted. More than 150 people from the college signed onto a letter last year blasting what they said was Cawthorn's predatory behavior and urged voters in his district to reject his candidacy.
Oh great, another weird sex pest mucking around in the halls of Congress. Madison seemed to go low profile after his unceremonious exit from Patrick Henry, which isn't really surprising and is generally the MO for sheltered golden boys like him whenever they get caught doing something bad. There's no word on if he ended up getting sent to the Alert Academy like all the Duggar boys do, but it's definitely a possibility. But generally speaking, there is little record of Madison's activities from the period through 2017 to 2018, save for this one really weird backhanded interview I found where he and his family are discussing all of the renovations they made to the home so it would be accessible to Madison following the accident. As you can see, this article refers to their home as accessible but charming. No, honey, no. We think it's wonderful that you make sure those kinds of people can get into your house. All the ramps and the handrails don't make it look nearly as awful as I expected. How do you handle all of the complaints from the neighbors? Madison wouldn't poke his head back out into the sunlight until 2019, this time to found SPQR Holdings, an investment firm that had precisely one employee, which was Madison, and made precisely one purchase in its entire existence, a foreclosed piece of 6-acre farmland in rural Georgia. And that's not even to get into the fact that SPQR is a Latin-flavored racist dog whistle for white nationalists. And just in general, everything about this, like the rest of Madison's life, just feels off. Esther Wang from Jezebel says it better than I can. I suppose registering an LLC and buying a single property technically qualifies someone to call themselves a real estate investor, but it definitely reads more as akin to playing with the idea of being a real estate investor. Perhaps so one could describe oneself as a real estate investor when mounting a run for Congress instead of someone who supports himself largely through his stock market investments. And in the tornado of poetic American decline that was the 2020 election cycle, Madison would go on to make that very congressional run. But even amongst an already wild political season in 2020, the race for the North Carolina 11th was seen as a doozy among doozies. Following Mark Meadows' appointment as Donald Trump's chief of staff in March 2020, there was a scramble of a full dozen primary challengers looking to take the Republican nomination for this seat. And in typical Madison fashion, he would actually go on to lose this first race before tripping and privileging into victory like he always does. Challenger Linda Bennett was actually able to beat Madison Madison in this primary by 2 points and also walked in with both the endorsements of Donald Trump and Mark Meadows himself. At that point, there's only one more endorsement I can think of that she might be missing. However, the large number of candidates in this pool prevented her from hitting the 30% quorum of votes that North Carolina requires to avoid a runoff election, and so that runoff was scheduled for June of 2020, which would be a one-on-one vote between Linda and Madison. Now, in most situations, a runoff is kind of considered a bit of a formality. Even if you have to have one, it's generally assumed that whoever won the primary is probably going to win the runoff as well. And bear in mind, Linda Bennett was still walking in with those huge endorsements and about $1.1 million in funding from Meadows' PAC alone. Meanwhile, Madison was a 24-year-old with only a little bit of work experience at Chick-fil-A and his own company to account for, along with a failed academic record and a list of sexual improprieties so long that it would be offended if you said it was just a mile. So how in the hell did we go from this to this? Well, if you ask Madison, I'm sure he'd say it was good old American hard work, will of the people, a blessing of God, something like that. And I'm sure he'd also tell you that he cooked every single person in his district their favorite meal and sang all of the babies to sleep. And while he may not be wrong about at least some of those things, he's also conveniently leaving out the $500,000 in dark money PAC donations that flooded his campaign that he received in the weeks leading up to the runoff election. Particularly notable, this dark money was primarily focused on putting out ads that claimed Linda Bennett was a never-Trumper. And need I remind you that she came into the election with Trump's endorsement.
With the White House and Supreme Court on the line, never-Trumper Linda Bennett sided with Hillary Clinton and the liberals. Listen for yourself.
I'm a never-Trump person. I don't want Trump. I am not for him. I am against him. Never Trump.
Conservative Madison Cawthorn will advance President Trump's agenda, defend the Second Amendment, build the wall, protect life. Trump conservative Madison Cawthorn for Congress. Protect Freedom PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
But it's also important to note that between any primary and runoff election, we can expect to lose about 38% of our turnout. And this election actually beat those projections, coming in at almost a 50% drop-off in turnout between the two elections. And we expect that a lot of that runoff comes from quote-unquote normal folks who were more than happy to vote in a primary, but who don't want to take time out of their day to do this runoff thing since they probably know how it's going to end up anyway. So, in a runoff election, you tend to get two types of voters. Either the intense zealots or the, oh shit, there was an election today kind of folks. And we know that both of these groups tend to be more susceptible to late cycle ad blitzes like this one. But no matter how it happened, the facts still remain. Madison went from a 2-point loser in the primary to a 31-point winner in the runoff. And he even overcame the woman who beat him the first time to get there. And in short order, we're going to begin to see the emergence of the Madison Cawthorn political figure that we all know and despise today. After this 2020 victory, Madison wasted no time in making sure that the whole world knew just exactly what type of Republican he was going to be. Instead of focusing on the needs of his own state and district, Madison decided that the best use of his talents would be at the farthest southern reaches of Texas near the U.S.-Mexico border. From Michael Cranish at the Washington Post. Cawthorn, meanwhile, traveled to the Texas border on July 30th and, echoing the views of a radicalized far-right ideology, alleged that there was a large group of cartels kidnapping our American children and then taking them to sell on the slave market, a sex slave market. He said that tens of thousands of our children were taken in what he called one of the greatest atrocities I can imagine, blaming the media for failing to focus on the matter. There is no evidence that cartels have kidnapped large numbers of U.S. children and sold them on a slave market. But in Madison's world, there is one atrocity that deserves to pull his highly valuable attention away from something as dire as a crisis of slave trading at the southern border between U.S. and Mexico. That's right. While everything else in the country was shutting down due to, an unprecedented wave of terror and tragedy, Madison's primary concern was making sure that his right to play around on DraftKings could not be infringed. What? Come on, we know he's not watching football for the sport, and you can look at him and tell he has a DraftKings account. Madison would also come under fire at this time for a series of unearthed photos that showed him taking a 2017 trip to the Eagle's Nest historical site in Germany. For those who are unaware, the Eagle's Nest was a codename given to the private bunker of one Adolf Hitler, seen here with the traditional regalia and weaponry of his people. Or, as Madison respectfully calls him, the Führer. And with that, Madison officially showed that he has more respect for Hitler than he does for any woman he has interacted with or ever will interact with. Okay, sure, yes, right at the bottom of the post, Madison does call Hitler a supreme evil. But it's also not like this white rights stuff isn't too far away from his brand, as we would see in a later feud he would maintain with Senator Cory Booker. And yet, since this was America in 2020, Madison would follow up his Führer fandom with a rousing career maker of a speech at the RNC, complete with all the inappropriate MLK references that conservatives love, and a grand finale that legitimately only Madison could pull off.
I know something about adversity. At 18 years old, I was in a horrific car accident that's left me paralyzed from the waist down. MLK's dream is our dream. For all Americans to be judged solely on their character. Be a radical for freedom. Be a radical for liberty. And be a radical for our republic, for which I stand. One nation under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Damn, dude, and here I thought Sasha Velour had the greatest finishing move of all time. I'm not gonna lie, that shit was inspiring as hell. We also see here one of Madison's primary public policy planks, namely that of healthcare reform. Madison is often happy to point out that he, like many other young and disabled Americans, was saddled with completely ludicrous medical debt. Following the car crash that left him paralyzed, Madison reports being over $3 million in debt. But just as Madison is wont to do, he's also leaving out some pretty critical details. Again, Michael Cranish from the Washington Post. As a result of the accident, Cawthorn has limited use of his legs, uses a wheelchair, and received a $3 million settlement from an insurance company, as well as other payments, and is seeking $30 million more, according to court records from several lawsuits related to the case. I mean, yeah, I'm glad at least one American was able to get their insurance company to pay up like they're supposed to, even if it was Madison Cawthorn that did it. But I do feel the need to point out that if every American had the resources to take their insurance companies to court whenever they decided not to provide the services they were paid to provide, well, we wouldn't really need healthcare reform now, would we? See, that's funny though. Listen to me talk about this shit like it matters. A lot of people would like you to believe that North Carolina's starting to turn purple or something like that, but none of that applies to the 11th District. Every reputable news source listed this as a likely, if not guaranteed, win for the Republican candidate. And wouldn't you know it, Madison did go on to cruise to victory against his standard issue, ex-military, centrist, red state Democrat opponent, Mo Davis. Yes, sir, Democrats, there is nothing quite like a Guantanamo Bay prosecutor to get all the liberal kids excited about Pokemon going to the polls. And Madison wasted no time in taking advantage of this protected victory of his, eagerly leading the way on some of the GOP's most controversial pet causes of the time. Just for reference, he was elected in November of 2020, and he didn't even make it to the end of the year before declaring full radical. Let's take a look at this clip from a Turning Point event.
In a lot of these liberal swing states that have liberal governors and liberal secretaries of state, you can see that they have broken the law and gone against our Constitution with this election. And so, because of that, on January 6th, as the people of Western North Carolina sent me to Washington to do a job, I will be contesting the election. And USA!
Madison stuck to his word, though, taking an active role in the January 6th insurrection, joining other Republican lawmakers in future episodes like Amy Crimmer and Josh Hawley. Really, though, Madison went the extra mile on this. It wasn't just enough for him to cast a vote and go home. He might as well have been Flava Flav for how much he was out there hyping up the Public Enemy.
My friends, I encourage you, continue to make your voice heard, because do we love Donald Trump? But my friends, we're not doing this just for Donald Trump. We are doing this for the Constitution. Our Constitution was violated. My friends, I encourage you, go back to your states after today. Hold your representatives accountable. Make sure that they stood up for election integrity and make your voices heard.
Now, Madison tried very quickly to backpedal on these statements. He didn't even make it a full week before making these comments on 112 from Ben Leonard at Politico. Once you start floating this idea of election fraud and people outright stealing an election and cheating, that has only one outcome, Cawthorn said in an interview with North Carolina's WTVD TV News. The party as a whole should have been much more wise about their choice of words. No. On 119, just a week later, he would change his story again, proclaiming that it was actually all Democrats' fault. I believe that this was agitators strategically placed inside of this group. You can call them Antifa, you can call them people paid by the Democratic machine, but to make the Trump campaign, the Trump movement look bad, and to make this look like it was a violent outrage, when really the battle was being fought by people like myself and other great patriots who are standing up against the establishment and standing up against this tyranny that we see in our country. Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. The important thing to take away from all this is Madison wasn't the only one doing the bad things. I just think it's really important that we all admit we did some things wrong, right, people? And honestly, he may have been a way to get away with all this and slip back into, well, what we called politics as normal at that time. But, well, you know, the whole thing about February of 2020. And while Madison did hold the party line on that particular issue, he was also quick to find ways to turn it to his benefit. As early as February of 2021, he skipped out on a House floor vote citing health and safety concerns while secretly attending the 2021 CPAC conference. Throughout 2021, we also dealt with Madison's very short, very tumultuous relationship and brief marriage with fiancée Christina Bayardell. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I knew about this divorce coming into this video and I was hoping this would be juicy, but nope. These two met hard, fell quick, got married, got divorced, and following that decided to stay as quiet and non-controversial on the subject as they possibly could. Honestly, this whole thing probably wouldn't be weird at all except for the fact that Madison Cawthorn's involved. Beyond all this stuff, though, it's really hard to differentiate Madison from his fellow Republican lawmakers on the basis of policy positions alone. And in all fairness to Madison, I don't think we can entirely trace this back to the Republican hive mind I've discussed in other videos. Honestly, I think it just has more to do with the fact that he was a freshman rep with almost no clout. I mean, at this point, he's barely been in there 2 years. He probably still hasn't had time to figure out where the bathroom and the employee lounge are.
I'm telling you, when I see the people that are in Washington, D.C. who are trying to insert their woke politics into our culture, trying to destroy Western civilization, trying to take all of our morality away from everyone, trying to make everyone genderless, sexless, and just absolutely godless, I realize that the American people are sick and tired of it. We want our country back, we want our culture back, and if you want to stand in the way of that, we will run you over.
But that's certainly not the only example we have.
Our culture today is trying to completely demasculate all of the young men in our culture. I mean, you can look at the testosterone levels in young men today, and they are lower than throughout all of history. And so I'm telling you, all of you moms here, the people who I said were the most vicious in our movement, if you are raising a young man, please raise them to be a monster.
Now please, don't get me wrong, I'm not lumping all of you wonderful Gen Z folks in with the likes of Madison Cawthorn. When paired with a legitimate concern for their fellow humans and an actual sense of compassion and morality, approaches to politics like Madison's can actually be quite beneficial and effective. It's one of the things I think makes Gen Z so rad, is this really cool, direct, unapologetic approach to politics. But as we've seen here with Madison, when it goes wrong, well, Kyle Rittenhouse gets a congressional internship. Gen Z, please do not come for me after this, by the way. I love you all, I love your memes, and I'm not going to pretend I'm not a little scared of you. Also, I'm really sorry about all the doggo jokes and the BuzzFeed quizzes. Our bad. Bear in mind as well that Madison's particular status as a rep meant that immediately after his victory, he had to turn around and start campaigning for his next election in 2022. By all accounts from November and December of 2021, it was generally considered that this was a safe seat for Madison. And in my opinion, that's where things start to get interesting, because Madison just could not resist the arrogance that often comes with a protected, privileged position like the one he occupied. And this would end up making 2022 a very interesting year in Madison's life. It started off wonderfully for him with a formal challenge to his eligibility for candidacy. Not a challenge to his candidacy, mind you, a challenge to his eligibility to even be a candidate at all.
North Carolina Congressman Madison Cawthorn is suing to stay on the ballot. It was last month when voters challenged his candidacy. They say that he took part in last year's insurrection at the Capitol. Congressman Cawthorn has since filed a lawsuit saying the challenge violates his First and 14th Amendment rights.
I would say that this part of the case is ongoing, but don't worry, we'll get there. Madison continued to up the ante on his political beliefs throughout early 2022, notably taking the extremely popular stance of blaming Ukraine for being invaded by Russia and calling President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky a thug. Of course, like he always does, he would go on to walk these comments back almost immediately. April would see Madison mired in some more traditional political scandals, like paying for his cousin's living space with congressional money, or paying his best friend out of both his campaign and congressional funds. It was around this time that Madison was also seen in some undated photos wearing lingerie on what he later claimed to be a cruise ship. And while it is admittedly out of character for Madison, I'm not going to focus on it, because who doesn't like lingerie? It feels so nice. But all of that nonsense leads us to May of 2022. First is the reason I'm sure probably about a third of you clicked on this video in the first place. On May 5th of this year, the American Muckrakers PAC released a video that they claimed to be of Madison nude, acting very lewd and inappropriately with one of his male friends. I'm not going to show the tape because fundamentally I don't want to spread around leaked nudes no matter what I do, and also I'd like to make some money on this video, so there's some tapes you don't need to see. Now, despite the fact that this video seems to have been filmed on a 1997 Nokia phone, Madison did end up confirming that it was him in the tape, citing that this was simply him and a childhood friend goofing around at a time when they didn't know they were being filmed. Now, I'm not going to mock Madison for being a goofy teenager, acting a little homoerotically, but I am going to put this book, Tea Room Trade by Laud Humphreys, up on screen and encourage you all to read it, considering it has quite a number of interesting things to say about why we see so many hardline conservative men end up being queer later on down in their lives. Besides, I think the most important Madison Cawthorn story of May 2020 wasn't the tape, but was rather his purchase of nearly $1 million in improperly tracked and registered cryptocurrency, including the conservative-favored Let's Go Brandon coin, and that he also may have used insider congressional information in part of his process for determining which currencies to buy. Shoot, oh, we went too far. I almost forgot. We missed the big twist from earlier, or happy twist. Are you ready? Are you sure? This mofo lost. This mofo lost. Woo! Yeah, woo! Woo! On May 17th of this year, Madison faced yet another massive field of GOP primary challengers. And that's already kind of odd, considering most people don't tend to try and primary out an incumbent. But I assume Madison must have just looked ripe for the picking. There was some good news for Madison in this. He did hit his quorum this time, 31.9% of the vote, which would meet the 30% quorum that the state of North Carolina would need to hit to avoid a runoff. So you may be asking yourself, what was the problem for him then? Now, the problem was State Senator Chuck Edwards, who also hit the quorum, except he hit the quorum with 33.4% of the vote. He lost! He lost! Hell yeah! Chuck wins! Hell yeah! Chuck wins! Okay, well, not really hell yeah so much as shit he'll do, I guess. It's not like Edwards is anything special. He is a bog-standard Republican with the same bog-standard opinions that Madison and every other Republican you can think of has. It's not like Edwards is anything other than a Trump-supporting Christian himself who prioritizes fetuses and the national debt over people literally starving and dying in the streets. The only thing we really get to celebrate here is that Madison's gone, and truth be told, Chuck could end up being worse. I'm realizing now that that happy twist ending kind of sucks. Oh well, time for my final thoughts. Okay, now I know it may not seem like it with that less than stellar lead-in and all, but I don't want to act like there aren't quite a number of positives to pull out of the Madison Cawthorn story. In the immediate sense of things, at least we can kind of now see the bottom of the pit that is what Republicans are willing to put up with from their elected officials. Of course, most, if not all of the people that they generally choose to represent them are garbage people who do work that is also garbage. But we have to give the voters their due. They put their foot down and decided that at least this candidate was a bridge too far for their vote to cross. Now, yes, it did take a 26-year-old with a dubious educational background, a penchant for only the shadiest of business endeavors, and a history of sexual improprieties, but like Lil Baby said, we all gotta start somewhere and we might as well go ahead and start here. And in the meantime, I want everyone watching this to, for at least just a moment, resist those feelings of hopelessness that come from seeing someone like Madison Cawthorn get elected. I get those feelings. I really do. Yet another unqualified moron that doesn't give a shit about anyone who doesn't look like them made it to Congress. And we're supposed to celebrate that he only got 2 years to screw everything up before his voters finally figured out how worthless he was? And to that I say, no. Don't celebrate. Maybe replicate. As I said earlier, the charisma and the youthful, righteous vigor that Madison brought to his position are not inherently bad things. In fact, if they're guided by a spirit of ethics and concern for our fellow people, they tend to be very good, effective ways to make change. But if someone like Madison Cawthorn, with so little to actually say, can ride a campaign built on that kind of zeal and passion, why can't you? And for the record, in the spirit of ethics, I don't want to spend this entire conclusion just stomping on Madison, though he deserves it. Madison Cawthorn is, and likely always will be, an American with a significant mobility disability. As someone who has encountered similar struggles and disabilities from his friends and loved ones and colleagues and clients and all sorts of folks, I struggle to express just how much I sympathize with that cause and how I also want to make an America that is more accessible and friendly to everyone. Truthfully, I'm overjoyed that Madison was able to get the payout that he deserved from his insurance company following his accident. I am overjoyed that at least in his case, the American healthcare system decided to work the way it was supposed to. And I am overjoyed anytime I get to see disability representation in Congress, regardless of how I feel about the person that is being referenced in that situation. But Madison just brought so little to the table otherwise that I really think his clock was shortened more than most before he even swore himself in. While I absolutely don't want to disparage anyone who has a homeschool education, I do think we all had the grounds to ask that maybe Madison provide us with a little bit more evidence that he could survive in a curriculum that wasn't made by Ken Ham. And when he tried to prove he could cut it in the academic world outside of his home, he failed. He failed academically, he failed socially, and he failed morally. And not only that, he failed with the most catastrophe and bluster he could possibly come up with. He failed his classwork, pissed off everyone in range at the school, and sexually harassed any woman who had the displeasure of interacting with him. Furthermore, Madison Cawthorn seems to lie the way that other folks might speak a second language. He's completely fluent in lies, he's more comfortable speaking in lies, and he has a hard time telling when he's switched between lies and the truth. Lies are like a second nature to Madison Cawthorn, and personally, I believe it has just as much to do with his fragile ego as it does with avoiding consequence. And so now, I challenge you to ask yourself some questions. Do I carry the baggage that Madison Cawthorn did into his election? Probably not. Could I do as good as he did in a leadership position? You damn sure can. Is it worth it? Well, I can't answer that question for everyone, but I do challenge all of you to stop for a moment and think. What if you had the chance to stop the next Madison, the next Marjorie, the next Matt? What if you could be the person that stood in their way so they didn't make it to Congress? I'm not telling everyone here to drop what they're doing and run for local office, although I do feel the need to say that if any of you do because of this video, I will be tickled pink, and I beg you to please reach out and let me know. But I am a person who has spent some time in my local political scene. I've pounded the pavement. I've knocked doors. I've been side by side with politicians trying to make the world around them a better place. And through all of that, I can tell you, the tide of politics is changing. Regular folks have figured out that instead of sending dipshits like Madison to Congress to speak for them, they can just go speak for themselves. So I guess I'll end this by saying, if you've ever once considered running for office, if you've ever even just thought about it for maybe a moment, maybe this is your sign to think about it again. Maybe this is your sign to do it. And in the meantime, that's the last time I'm going to say his name during this episode. I've already said it enough, and I think it's time that we celebrate the fact that, if nothing else, he'll at least be gone soon enough. I love you all. Take care. Whew, all right. Well, that was a blast. I wanted to show off my cool new shades. I got some cool Pit Vipers. These are the Pride 2000s. They're all rainbow and slick. I just wanted to wear them here because they look so tight. Once again, as always, thank you so much for sitting through yet another one of my long-ass political rants. I know y'all say you love them. I still don't understand why, but thank you so much. It means the world to me. Thank you all so much for all of your support once again through all this Lawson Bates nonsense. You have kept me and Jen going even at times where we didn't feel like we could. That means the world to us, and I just can't properly express it. If you like what we do, I encourage you to consensually smash that like and subscribe button. Hit that little bell if you're real into it, because then you'll know anytime we drop some new content. Please check out all of our merch. We have all of our merch right now on Bonfire. If it's not Bonfire, it's not Fundy Fridays. There have been some people selling some counterfeit merch of ours, so be careful. Please feel free to reach out to us on our social media. We love to hear from folks. We'll be back with some more great episodes. And until then, do something kick-ass this weekend. And if that means you managed to take a shower for the first time in 3 days or cook yourself a healthy breakfast or something, then by all means, that's kick-ass, ain't it? Y'all take care. I love you. Be good to one another. All that good stuff. Oh, and just before I leave, let's watch Lawson get his shit rocked one more time. It's a full-time job, and it's very time-consuming, and people don't understand exactly how hard it is to be King James, you know? It's like the Stone Cold dress shirt doesn't just show up, you know?
Ooh, you know what? I could be like this.
I don't just appear in this pool looking like eye candy for you.